welcome back to the DadFit project. This is episode 2. So in episode 1, we went over why is it important to train to get stronger, just generally for your overall health, for all the nuance aspects of that. So today's episode, what I'm going to try and do is cover how we actually get stronger. So this is a process known as stress recovery adaptation. You'll hear people talking about this as the stress recovery adaptation cycle. It's to describe it as a cycle is more of a just a good way of thinking about it than what actually happens. It's not like you go through stress recovery and adapt in discrete phases. It's always happening all the time. So, but obviously that's more complex than some like it's useful to think about. So breaking it into the phases of stress recovery and then adaptation is a useful thing to do. I'm being joined with some members of the Dad Fit project who are in the support group who are kind of contributing and going and asking questions and benefiting from that. So if you are interested in joining, I'll put the link to join the WhatsApp support group in the description. But more on that later. Right, let's get on with what we're actually going to talk about today. So how do we get stronger? Stress recovery adaptation. Right. So first part of this equation or this cycle is the stress. So when we were talking about the uh, the way that we impose this stress in the gym, uh, we either do uh, more weight, more rep. Well, we can use the weight, we can use the reps, we can use the rest times, we can use the range of motion of our exercises. I mean, we can also use how often reps and sets should be in there as well. And then obviously how the frequency. So are we squatting 3 times a week? Are we squatting twice a week? Are we squatting once a week? Are we deadlifting once a week? All those things. Okay. So um, the way a really good analogy of this to think about actually how this like a practical example that everyone will be familiar with is what the process is of you trying to get a suntan. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but when you're trying to get a suntan and you're trying to get your skin to be darker, you have to go out in the sun. So if you just went out in the sun for, so let's say the first time you go out in the sun, you've not been out in a while. It's the first sunny day of the year, especially kind of conditions like we have in Scotland. You go out and you sunbathe for 10 minutes on your front, 10 minutes on your back. Your skin maybe gets a little bit pink depending on how much sunscreen you use, but you've imposed a stress onto your skin. Your skin wants to be able to deal with that stress better than it did. So next time it sees that stress, it wants to be able to deal with it better. So what does your skin do? Uh, is it melatonin? No, I think that's the sleep. Melanin, I think maybe is the word I'm looking for. I think melatonin's the one that helps you go to sleep. So melanin, it will regulate the production of melanin in your skin and make your skin darker. Now, the problem is that's the stress, is the sun, and then the recovery is the time that you're inside out of the sun, and then the adaptation is the skin getting darker. What we've got to realize is if I just go out for 10 minutes the next day, that might work again, okay? Or wait until my skin's healed. And then I go 10 minutes the next day and I go 10 minutes the next day. Now, if you do that for 2 weeks, you won't actually get any darker than the day after your first session because the the stress hasn't went up. all you've done is provide the same amount of stress for the same period of time. Now, it could be a sunnier day, I suppose, but let's just assume the sun is the same angle. You're going out at the same time of day every time. Let's assume all that's the same. You don't actually get stronger, so get browner. So, in order to get your skin to be darker, the time you spend in the sun has to increase. Now, you do that for 6 months, you might have to be outside for a few hours a day for your skin to get darker. So this is an analogy that bases on you got to start small and build up gradually, but the stress must increase. And when we're talking about tanning in the sun, assuming that you're going out at the same time of day and everything, it's the time that is the stress, okay, that you're out in the sun, okay? So when we're talking about stuff in the gym and we've got to get stronger, if I just come in and I do the same weight and I do the same reps and I do the same rest time, I do the same range of motion and I do the same plan every week, I actually don't get stronger. Something's got to change. The stress has got to go up. Now, when you're first starting off, the easiest way to do it is to just increase the weight. It's all you've got to do. You just got to get the weight to go up, and that will actually, and that's a parallel to just increasing the time that you're there in the sun. So that's the weight going up. We can change the reps on the sets, and we can change the rest times, and we can change the range of motion exercises. We can choose different exercises as well. So that would be like if you were trying to tan early in the morning and you'd got as much out of that as you could when the sun was low, and then you started going out and trying to get a suntan later on in the day. And then obviously frequency is how often you do it. But those are all things. So this is the problem that people have in the gym is they have their routine, and that's the routine they do. They don't actually progress. They don't ask their body to do more weight or do more reps or uh, reduce the rest time in between their sets. Now, rest time is a bit of an iffy one because actually rest time, like making the rest time longer, might actually be the adaptation that you need, the variable change, but could be to make it short as well. And then different ranges of motion, different exercise selection. And then obviously how many times a week you're doing something is also important. A week is a very um, it's a completely arbitrary variable. It's just in our modern day society we split things up into weeks just because that's how that's how we've organized our society. Your body doesn't recognize a week. It recognizes days and maybe seasons. There's been some evidence to show that, but mostly your body just works on a day to day basis. All right. It doesn't recognize like your stress recovery adaptation cycle could be 10 days long for your deadlift. Also, that doesn't fit neatly into a week, or it could be 11 days or 12 days, but it doesn't fit neatly into a week. So then your training has to reflect that. Okay, but I'm kind of getting into the weeds a bit now. Right. So my basic point is the time in the sun has to go up. The stress has to go up. All right. So I'll go back. So every time we go to the gym, we've got to do a little bit more than we did last time. Um, and as a beginner, like I said earlier, the easiest way to do that is just to put weight on the bar because you want to keep your training as simple and straightforward as you can for as long as you can. There's no point in someone who's just starting lifting weights coming in and doing a 12-week periodized uh, mesocycle of training with 4 microcycles involved. That's just completely pointless. They're not going to be in good enough shape to do it for a start. They're going to get injured because it's going to be a volume phase at the front and then an intensity phase at the back. So their movement patterns are probably going to be all over the place unless they've been training before and they do a short kind of LP and then maybe a couple of months after that, then they get into some sort of periodized um, routine. And I would even say that person like that would be more suited at going to like a 2 week period, 2 week periodization blocks, and that would probably do them for multiple months, if not possibly years of training. Okay, now so the stress recovery adaptation cycle. So we've talked about the stress. So that's going from your bench press going from 60 kilograms to 62 kilograms, 3 sets of 5, and then the next time you see your bench press, you do 66 kilograms, or if you can take 2.5 kilo jumps, or if you're American, you'll take 5 pound jumps. At some point, that's going to stop working, and then we need to get into these variables. Are we changing the reps and the sets, the rest times? Are we choosing different exercise selections? Are we uppering? Are we increasing or lowering the frequency of exposure to the stress? All right. Right. So we've imposed the stress in the gym. We have, and in the gym, you don't get bigger by lifting weights. You get bigger by recovering from lifting weights. So the next step is recovery. Uh, we don't get strong by lifting weights. We get stronger from recovering from lifting weights. So your program isn't just the sets and the reps and the weight and the exercise selection and the rest times in the gym. It's the food you eat, it's the sleep you get, it's your hydration, and it also needs to incorporate some way of mediating for life stress. The reason I put that life stress part in is you actually can't, as an organism, you're not very good at uh, distinguishing what type of stress comes from what area. Your body just kind of, it's like you've got a your ability to cope with stress is like a bucket with a hole in the bottom of it. So life stress is going in, and that's the water. Now, as long as the bucket doesn't overflow, everything will generally be fine. The more stress you put at work, that's the more flow, that's the more water that's going in. The harder you're working in the gym, that's the more water. That's like another tap going in. Um, you have fights with your girlfriend or your husband or your wife or like all the time. That's another tap that's getting turned on. Um, your your parents are elderly and they're like maybe they've got cancer or maybe you're dealing with them putting them into assisted living and they're not liking that. There's like all these things are filling up your bucket of stress and your ability to deal with that stress. Some people have phenomenal ability to deal with stress and just soldier on and get through it, whereas other people don't. And that just like that can depend on personality, that can depend on your genetics, that can actually even depending on how fit you actually are. If you're fit and healthy, your ability to deal with life stress actually increases, and you end up having been more resilient, and making sure that uh, your ability to deal with those extra things actually gets better. It's like the hole in the bottom of the bucket that's draining out the stress is bigger. So this is where like there's this dichotomy of exercise, because exercise can be a de-stressor, but it is also a stressor. So it's kind of uh, cycling back from that. So it can help you be better at dealing with stress, but it is also a stress in itself in the acute sense of the word. All right. So what you have to do is eat plenty of protein, eat enough calories to fuel your training and recover. if you're not able to add weight to the bar, the first place I'd look is probably food. You got to sleep 7 to 9 hours a night, unbroken if it can be. Get as close to that as best you can. There is the odd outlier that can cope with 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, and do pretty well on those. Those people are like the end of the bell curve. Those people are pretty rare. That's probably not you. If you are currently only getting 5 or 6 hours sleep a night, I think you've probably just got used to how shit you feel, and you don't realize actually how amazing you would feel if you got 8 hours of sleep, 8, 9 hours of sleep. If you got your whatever you use to track your sleep was giving you like an 85 score, 85% score for everything on that. Okay, um, and then hydration. Hydration is really, really, really important. I particularly notice when I'm dehydrated, my knees get sore, my Achilles get sore, my hips get sore, just because hydration filters through like every cell in your body. Um, if everything's well hydrated, like a well hydrated, so plenty of water, a well fed and a well rested organism, the muscles, all that, it will be in a low stress, in a low stress environment. You will be amazed at how well you can adapt to lifting weights, how much stronger you can get, even if you've never lifted weights before. Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned before, the stress recovery adaptation cycle doesn't happen in like these discrete little phases where, oh, now I'm being stressed, now I'm recovering, and now I'm adapting. The whole thing is happening all the time, just like breathing's happening all the time, thinking's happening all the time. Your blood's pumping, your heart's pumping blood through your body all the time. Okay, but there are a few things we can take away. So for beginners, the stress recovery adaptations, and for like really new people who have like never trained with weights before, it can take as little as 24 hours for this full. You see we have the baseline here. We then have a training stimulus here, which is our stress. We then have a dip in performance. So that's you being tired after the gym. That's part of the process, or tired after your run, or tired after whatever the thing you've done is, the stress. You have a dip in performance, and then you have this gradual climb back to baseline, and then you exceed the baseline. So this might be someone coming in and seeing me for their first training session with me, and we go through all the lifts. We do all the teaching progressions, and let's say they come in and they squat 50 kilograms for 3 sets of 5. That is that stress right there. The next day they're a little bit sore. They're eating their protein. They're eating their rice and their potatoes and their chicken and their steak, and they sleep. And then we get to here, and they might actually be ready to adapt and have finished that whole kind of process, that whole kind of cycle, um, within 24 hours. Now, that depends on a few things. It depends on how big the stress was. It depends on how sensitive they are to. So you can have people that are very sensitive to training, and like just a little bit of training will get them a really big response. And then you have people who train every day of their life, I've trained for years, but I've only got half of what that person's got. So that, again, that's on a spectrum. Okay, so that process can take 24 to 72 hours. So on average, we say 48 hours. So this person come in and they do their first session with me on Monday. They then have Tuesday. They're a bit tired. Wednesday, they sleep Monday night. They eat Monday night. They eat all day Tuesday, they eat all their food on Tuesday, they sleep on Tuesday night, they have the breakfast on Monday, and then by Wednesday, hopefully, they've kept it right there, and then we can impart another stress, which would be they do 3 sets of 5 at 55 kilograms. All right. So, in this process, where you can add weight every workout, for most people, will last somewhere depending on your age, your sex, your training history, your body weight, your current muscle mass, your willingness to put on body weight, can last anywhere between 4 weeks and 4 months. It can even on the like if you have a young, underweight male who's willing to eat enough food to add 40 or 50 pounds of mass, that can last for months. Because if he's adding 5 pounds a week uh, uh, to his body weight, or let's just say even conservatively, if he's adding um, uh, 3 pounds a week to his body weight, so let's say he had 60 pounds, that's 20 weeks of him just adding weight, so that's 5 months. But then that process is, but just because he's put on so much more muscle mass, that process is going to last. He could maybe go 6, 7, 8, 9 months on this cycle, okay? And you're adding small increments of weight, so you're not expecting to add 10 kilos to anything. You might be able to do that between your first and second deadlift sessions. That might happen. But after that, very soon, you'll be going down to 2.5 kilos or 5 pound jumps if you're in America. And then you might even take smaller jumps on that. Then you might even take smaller jumps on that based on usually for the upper body lifts. The overhead press will, and all four of your lifts, so your press, your bench press, your squat, and your deadlift, because of the amount of muscle mass that's used on those, the varying amount of muscle mass, the ones with least amount of muscle mass, they tend to peter out on this process quickly, and things need to become more complex. And we'll go over to that in a second, okay? And during this whole process, the trainee only needs to squat, press, bench press, deadlift, power clean, and chin up. And if they can't power clean, they would do barbell rows, or a light deadlift, possibly. Okay, and that's like they don't have to do anything more than that. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's 5. That's 6, 7 exercises. There are so many exercise templates out there that you can buy, and you can go and buy an exercise program that have 15 different exercises every week. They have like 3 sessions a week, and there's 5 different exercises every session. That's not necessary for a beginner. It's overkill. It doesn't actually allow you to get good at the things you're trying to get good at because you don't see it for another week. And then if you miss a couple of days off the gym, it might be a week and a half till you see the next thing. And as a beginner lifter, you're trying to get those motor patterns ingrained in you. And once you get those basics, actually all the other exercises become really simple. If you can get those, the squat, the press, the bench press, the deadlift, the power cleans, chin ups, barbell rows, if you can get those done and execute them really, really well, every other variation of those becomes easy to learn. Okay? So that's the adaptation, right? So what are the actual results of this? So what we have, as you can see, I've taken this from Starter Strength Basic Barbell Training 3rd edition. This is the graph that lands out, so you can see the time in months. So we're like your first year of training here. See if I can. Do I have like a pointer? Laser pointer? Oh, I do. Yeah. So you can see your first graph, your first year is here. You can see your strength performance increases markedly. The rate of adaptation starts off very high and kind of starts to peter out, and then training complexity still stays very low. Things need you can see here. So training complexity basically like how long is the cycle that you're being on. So are you adding weight to the bar every week or every session, every week, every 2 sessions? So we can see here. So novice is daily planning. That can take up to 9 months. Intermediate would be weekly planning. And I quite like the way of thinking it is like you're either a novice or you're not. The intermediate and weekly planning is useful for some people and not useful for others. Okay, so weekly planning, maybe even bi-weekly planning, yeah, or tri-weekly planning, or or monthly planning, and that's kind of a continuum, and you'll go through that with there. But you can go on like a weekly. Like I've got clients like one of the guys that's on the call right now has been on weekly planning for probably the last year and a half in terms of adding weight to the bar, with periods of inconsistency and that. But if there's ever a time where he doesn't manage to get the gym free well, he comes back, he does a quick LP, and then he goes back onto weekly planning, and he's making great progress with that, and we've not had to make things any more complicated than that. Okay, take my laser pointer off. Right, and then results. Okay, so what I've done is you can see the this is one of my clients. So you can see the first kind of month of his training here, and then he actually had to go in for a hernia operation about here. So if we could that like this is his 5 rep max PRs. So what we did was he was going really well, really well, really well. He had an old hernia come up and then had to go and get fixed. Like you just go and get that stuff seen to, you get it fixed, and then it's not a problem after that. Okay. But unfortunately, he had to deload his weights a little bit. So if you'd actually looked and like, so the green line is a deadlift. His deadlift would have maybe have dropped down to here, and then we would have started to build back up again and on that slope. And you can see how the weight is going up every session. So like this, like from here to here was us just kind of like recovering. So his graph would have looked like that. Okay. So you can see the results from that. So this is someone who's went through LP actually twice and still is all on LP. You can see there's a wee negative chin up dot in there, because I'm starting to get into do some chin ups. Yeah, so that's the process that everyone goes through and how we actually try to get stronger. Okay. I hope you found that enlightening. I hope that was useful. Um, and go back and watch the first part, Dad Fit episode 1. And I'll go on to, we've got some good questions from been submitted for the Q&A, so I'll go on to those now. So a bit more about the Dad Fit project before I do that. Okay, so Dad Fit project is a project that's I'm trying to educate, inform, and communicate fitness to men, basically. Um, I'm I'm open. It's completely free to join. All you do is go down below and join from the link from the WhatsApp. Once you ask to join the group, I'll send you a message with like a private message with the intake form. You fill in the intake form. I book a call with you. We have a chat through all the answers on the intake form, get some value out of that for you. And then once I've established that you're a real person who actually wants to be involved and wants to not spam the group with something else, then we'll get you on, introduce you to all the guys, and you can start kind of getting involved with all the content and stuff in there. Okay. Right. So let's go on to the Q and A's. The qua. Right. Okay, question number 1. What would your advice be to someone who has been following a strict eating routine and a calorie deficit to help them lose weight? I still have challenges hitting my 200 grams of protein a day, and the calorie goal I have set, um, due to the habits I've developed before working with yourself. So that's a client who works with me. So I'll give you some context. This client was overweight by quite a lot. They cleaned their diet. I think they were doing CrossFit, and they went to see a personal trainer, and that person helped them lose lots of weight, and that was excellent. I think 30 kilograms, I think they lost, which is absolutely fantastic. The problem with a situation like that is that comes with a lot of baggage. Being being uh, being that heavy and uh, having that mindset of I am a heavy person can be it can be a toll on the brain. So the advice that I would have for this person, and perhaps if you're watching this and you have got to the stage where you are you were heavy and you've lost a lot of weight, and you are now kind of wondering, oh my god, like I'm putting weight back on, is there's two things. One, the weight on the scale is not any measurement of you as a person. It's merely your interaction with gravity. That's all it is. The value that people put on their own mass is it's a fucked up situation. Um, Now, I'm not saying it's okay for you to be a great big fat slob and just eat whatever you want and and not care about what your weight is. But we're talking about a situation where like your health and the plate and the thing that number on the scale, that little number that's kind of between your feet when you stand on that bathroom scale, that is of no correlation to your worth as a person or your worth as to your training. It's not really actually that helpful to your training. Um, if I have a client who's severely underweight, I'm going to focus on putting weight on the scale. If I have a client that's severely overweight, which I've helped many people lose, uh, get out of that situation where they're like very like unhealthily overweight. The That person, actually, we don't focus on the scale. We'll focus on inches. We'll focus on their strength, and we'll focus on their habits. So the advice that I would give to this person is you have tortured yourself about that number on the scale for many years in your life, and and probably for years before you actually made the changes necessary to actually bring that number down, and that has eaten on your own self worth. You don't have to worry about that anymore because you're now focusing on what your body can do rather than what a number on a scale is telling you. You are on a journey right now where you have the opportunity to be the fittest, strongest, and uh, most robust version of yourself. And eating good food, hitting your 200 grams of protein is part of that process. It's maybe not going to be part of that process forever, but it's part of the process right now. And as hard as it can be, you need to kind of just separate that that part. As I'm now focused on what my body can do. I'm going to see what my body can do. This journey is going to go, what am I actually capable of? How fast am I? How how high can I jump? How fast can I sprint? How much weight can I squat? How much weight can I deadlift? What can I get my bench press to? How athletic can I feel? Can I manage all those expectations? And you actually probably are going to be surprised at what the scale says. And you go, my God, last time I was that weight, I was a big fat slob. Or last time I was at that weight, I was coming down. I was on the way down from being a big fat slob, and and I never wanted every bit of that weight down. You thought, oh, I'm never going to be here again. I'm never going to be here again. I'm never going to be here again. But now you're on a different path. You're not on that path. You're on a different branch of the journey that you're on. Okay, so we're getting a bit philosophical here. So the practical advice I would give you is every time you are having a meal, you're fueling your performance, you're fueling the goals that you have set for yourself, and you're fueling your ability to achieve those goals. All right, so that's advice I would give you. And obviously, if you've got any questions about that, or anyone that's watching, if you've got any questions back, just put it in the comments. Okay. Right. Let's go on to the next question because we've been going for about 40 minutes. I'll try and keep this to less than an hour. Right. Question number 2. If you're doing regular strength training, could you be doing other forms of training alongside it, such as regular cardio, brackets running, or something like a HIIT class? Okay, so there's two aspects to this. Okay, so there's a health aspect and a performance aspect. So to meet the minimum requirements for cardiovascular health, I think it's 60 minutes of high intensity cardiovascular exercise per week, or 120 minutes a week of moderate intensity. So that could be like 4 30-minute walks a day, something like that. So high intensity. This is where a lot of people go wrong with high intensity interval training. So HIIT. So high intensity interval training, they'll do something like, and they'll maybe choose a decent modality for it. They'll choose an assault bike, or they'll choose a something, and they go for 30 seconds and they rest for 30 seconds. So they go for 30 seconds, they rest for 30 seconds. The problem with that is high intensity high intensity needs to be at above a 90% effort level. You need to be going hard, so hard that it absolutely sucks ass. Like, it needs to be so hard. So the longest people can really last for that is about 20 seconds. Now, if you're Michael Phelps, and you you can last for like you can last that for 2 minutes. If you're Lance Armstrong, you can last that for hours. You can survive. Your ability to handle that threshold of where it starts to burn is just it doesn't burn any less for you. It's just you can handle it. Okay, so um, exercise needs to be done very intensely with at least 5 parts rest to 1 part of work. So if you're doing your HIIT and you're going to say, I'm going to do 15-second intervals, that means you need to rest at least 75 seconds. So 5 times 15, 75. So that means you're doing 15 seconds of work every minute and a half. Now, if you do that for 10 rounds, that's your 15 minutes. That's 15 minutes. So you just got to do that 4 times a week, 15 minutes, 4 times a week. And that can be done after your strength training. In terms of the moderate exercise, I mean, you could combine these two. The moderate exercise, so like high intensity stuff, needs to be like kind of 90% plus of heart rate. So if you're 20 years old, you're a good estimation of your max heart rate is 220 minus your age. So if you're 20 years old, your max heart rate would be 200. That means your HIIT training has got to get your heart rate up to above 180 beats per minute. Okay, as you get older, that'll come down. But yeah, so and the moderate stuff needs to be going somewhere between anything above 50% to 80%. When you start getting maybe 70, maybe we could shorten that maybe somewhere between 60 and 75%. Once you start getting to above 75% of your max heart rate, what the problem is that it's just hard enough that you can't do it for very long, and it actually takes the puff out of you, so you can't do a lot of it. So if you reduce the intensity down a little bit, you can do way more of it. You can keep like a 65% heart rate. You can keep that going. That's like a kind of a moderate jog or a quick walk or like a good march. Um, uh, and you can go with that. And I would recommend walking for the moderate stuff and a low impact modality for the high intensity stuff. So that could be like a C2 rower, an assault bike, um, or a sled. Somewhere where you're not pounding with your feet, you're not jumping. There's like because we're working on conditioning, we're not working on stuff, and that's one of the main problems that I have with like group fitness classes is like if I was through a group fitness class, it would be 20 minutes. There would be uh, enough prowlers or sleds for like one sled for every 3 or 4 people. And all you would do is just one person would push the sled up and down, the next person would push the sled up and down, the third person would push the sled up and down, and then you would just go every 90 seconds. And you would do that for your 20 minutes. That would be an actual group exercise program that was actually effective and did what it was meant to do without a whole lot of nonsense and a whole lot of absolute absolute. And then I would just get people to lift that. Okay. Um, and then there's a so that's the health aspect, but then there's a performance aspect. So the fitter you are, um, so if you're lifting and you're getting strong, let's say you are having to take longer and longer rest times in between your sets, and now your workouts are uh, taking an hour and 45 minutes. They used to take an hour, and then they went an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 15, and they're gradually just creeping up. The weights are getting heavier and heavier and heavier. One, that's maybe a training split. You need to problem that you need to focus on, or two, you need to get fitter. It is a really good way of getting fitter for lifting. And your rest times may go from like if you spend like a good 5 or 6 weeks doing doing HIIT a couple of times a week after like say you did your upper body session on a Monday, and then you did your accessories after that, and then on Tuesday you did your lower body session, and finish every lower body session. So you're on upper lower split. Finish every lower body session for a full 6 weeks. You did 10 and 50 on the assault bike for 10 rounds. So that's a minute. So that's only 10 minutes. You would notice that difference would creep into your lifting. There might be an initial dip in your performance in the lifting. Things might feel a bit, but you would acclimatize to that. You would normalize to that, and then you would see a much better performance in the gym. You'd actually be able to do, and then either your workouts would take less time, or you can fit more work into the same amount of time. Okay. And then there's also in terms of cardio for sporting performance. Obviously, if you're like a football player or a soccer player, if you're American, like it doesn't really matter how strong you are if you can't run about if you're not fit a bit, if you're not fit enough to actually run up and down the field. Like so, there's a performance aspect of that. However, what you'll find with most sport athletes is and I'll maybe do a video on this actually, is the two-factor model of sports performance, which is practice and training. So your training is you're getting strong and you're getting fitter, and then your practice is doing your sport. So that's going to like your football practice, your basketball practice, your rugby practice, doing your tennis practice, whatever your sport is. And that is usually enough to get you conditioned to a high enough level that you're going to be able to participate in your sport. Now, you may have to do more if you're trying to become a professional tennis player or a professional rugby player. And obviously, you're now devoting more resources towards that, and you're possibly getting paid for that. It's possibly your job. So then that becomes a different situation. But in terms of like a normal everyday person who has their job and is doing their sport as a hobby or a pastime, lift and play your sport, and make sure that you're recovered after your lifting, so so the fatigue from that doesn't impact by food, sleep, hydration, reducing your life stress. Okay, right. Next question. What are the advantages and disadvantages of supersets? I have actually done a video on this on my YouTube channel. I'll put that down in the description. A quick summary. So the advantages of supersets, saves time. You could do, and especially for like accessory work. So if you're doing like some arms work after your upper session, you're doing some bicep and tricep stuff, just superset them. Just do your bicep stuff and then do your tricep stuff and then rest. That'll turn like 15, 18 minutes into like 9, 10 minutes. So that'll save you time. You get at the gym because we've got shit to do. The disadvantages are that you will be more fatigued. Will you be more fatigued? It depends. So for isolation stuff, it's great because, like, for example, the bicep, you're doing your bicep curl there. Um, you're doing the bicep curl there. Your triceps resting, and then you're doing your tricep, whether that's like your cable push downs or your lying tricep extension or rolling dumbbell extensions or whatever it is. Your biceps resting, so you can flip flop in between them quite easily. Where you might run into problems if you're supersetting something like two um, compound movements. So, for example, like a squat and a bench press. Now they are two, like your bench press is your upper body, and your squat is quote unquote your lower body, but it's not really. A squat involves everything. So if you're doing your squat and you're actually lifting a heavy enough weight that actually is going to make a difference to getting you stronger, you're probably going to blunt your performance on the bench press if you do that straight after. One, your heart rate's going to be pretty high, probably like 75, 80%. And then during a bench press, we want to have a good foundation on the floor. So that involves leg drive, holding our torso in a certain position. But if that's fatigued from your squat, you're not able to bench press as much weight. So supersets save you time. Use them for isolation stuff, or at least single joint exercises, and don't use them for compound exercises. Now, what I will say is, at home when I train to save time, I'll warm up my squats. I'll do my first set of squats, and then I've got two racks. I'll go over to the other rack and I'll start warming up my bench press or my press. That's fine because we're just warming up at that point. We're not like your warm up sets aren't meant to be fatiguing. They're meant to be warmed up. So then I would do all my warm ups, go back over to the squat rack, do my second set of squats. If I had any more warm ups to left to do on my press or my bench press, I would finish those off, go back, rest the appropriate amount of time, go back, do my last set of squats or finish my squats, and then my bench press is warmed up. I'll do my first set of bench press, go back over, start unracking my squat, and then once I've unwrapped the squat, maybe go and do my next set of bench press, and then start warming up the deadlift. So that's a really good way of saving time. But yeah, hopefully that gets you some of the advantages and disadvantages of supersets. So the last question we had last night, my mic died. I've just answered just now, and I'm going to add it in at the end of this video. So the question was, okay, I have a training plan, but I really struggle with routine, consistency, and I'm always falling into old familiar habits which are not helping me be my best self. I can't quite seem to find my why, a meaningful why that I can connect with. Any advice, welcome, and thank you. Okay, so it's there's a lot to unpack here. The routine and so you have a training plan that you have in place, but you're failing to meet the demand. You're failing to like check all the boxes on that training plan. First thing I would say is maybe the training plan need to change. Maybe if it's 4 day week, 4 days a week you're trying to do, maybe you need to have a 3 day a week program. If it's 3 days a week, you maybe have a 2 day a week program. A lot will come from that, especially if you're just a person who's training just for kind of general health. If you're already reasonably strong, then things might need to change. You might have to give yourself permission to not to change the plan. Because plans need to change sometimes. If you are, and this is the mistake that people make when they first start going back to the gym, is they say, right, Monday morning I'm going back to the gym. I'm going 5 days a week. I'm doing 6 a.m. Monday to Friday, and then rest at the weekend. And that maybe works for Monday, then Tuesday, and then they go, oh, I'm tired on Wednesday, I'll skip Wednesday and I'll go Thursday, Friday. They get to Friday and they went, here were my expectations, here's where I actually performed. And the delta between that, the difference between that is directly proportional to how shit you feel about yourself about not completing the task. And you have to sometimes say to yourself, right, maybe I was a bit overambitious, maybe I'm trying to bite off a bit more than I can chew, and maybe I need to tone down my expectations, be consistent with a lower amount of expectation for a long time, because it's consistency that actually gets you the win. It's not, you cannot make up for like you can't miss the gym for 3 weeks and then make up for it in a week. I would rather I'd rather someone went once a week consistently, never missed, than they didn't go for 3 weeks and then did 4 sessions in 1 week. I think you would actually make more progress if you just did that 1 session a week. Now, is that optimal? No, but it's consistent. And then what you can do is right, I've been going to the gym once a week for 3 months now. This is the time, and you try and the key to that is to try and always go at the same time, try and follow a plan and see results. Give yourself results. Sort your diet outside the gym. There's lots of stuff you can do to improve your health that isn't in the gym. And your training plan, as I said earlier, your training plan isn't just the lifts and the sets and the reps and the rest times. That's not just your training. Your training plan is everything. It's your sleep, your recovery, your hydration. All that stuff is your training plan. So 75% of that is stuff you don't do in the gym. Okay, now going to the gym is important because that's what gives the stimulus, the stress, as the whole point of this podcast is about. So that's part one. Maybe lower your expectations. Okay, you struggle with, so that's kind of getting the consistency aspect. if you're struggling with routine, quite often people who struggle with routine, they want to be in a routine, but their life is maybe a bit chaotic and a bit hectic, and they're being pulled in several different directions. The person that is answered this question, and I know for a fact that is happening with them, just because like the conversations we've had in the past, they're getting pulled in all sorts of. They've got teenage kids, they've got a lot of demands. They're just like teenage kids are weird because they want to be independent, but they don't quite have the skills yet. For example, they maybe um, they haven't passed their driving test, especially if like I mean I live out in the middle of nowhere. Once I passed my driving test, that was like freedom for me. Um, because my mum and dad didn't have to take me everywhere. I got a little banger of a car, uh, uh, and I just that was something that I just all of a sudden I didn't have to ask permission from anyone to go anywhere. I had a job, I was earning money, like I all that stuff, and I was only 18. I think I was 18 when I passed my driving test. So uh, teenage kids can be demanding until it's all of a sudden they're not. Um, so again, that comes to the consistency part of it. Maybe you have to be happy with going to the gym twice a week, and maybe a third time if you can is like a bonus session while that situation resolving itself, and your kids are uh, gaining their independence, so they become less reliant on you, and then you have more time for yourself. But there's also a part of that where if your kids are very demanding on you, obviously like a 6 month old, like that's a demanding situation. Like you need to be flexible in your routine because you might have a crap night's sleep. You might have been up all night with the children, and then you're training the next day. Okay, maybe we can go a different way. So uh, a different a different priority. But then the priorities and the phases of your life will change, and at some point you will have fewer priorities for other people, and you'll have be able to have more time and uh, more more time for yourself, basically. Okay, so I wouldn't worry about that too much just now. Try and train as consistently as you can. Lower your expectations before. I would try and get to gym at least once a week, so that the work you have done up to this point isn't wasted by you going, oh, I'll go next week, and you do that for 4 months in a row, and all of a sudden you're not anywhere where you want to be, and you've actually got behind. Um, and then that comes down to the familiar habits part of this question. Familiar habits, and I'm assuming that that's things like uh, habits that are not good for you. So um, comfort eating, uh, perhaps even like wine, things like that, things that are not getting you towards your goal, that you're using as coping mechanisms to get the dopamine that you're not getting from your training. Because what's happening is you really enjoy training, you really get a really good buzz from it, and your body's used to that level of feeling good, and the dopamine. And training's hard, but it also feels really good if you're doing it correctly. Um, and you're trying to get that dopamine from somewhere else. So you scroll on your phone with a glass of wine and some chocolate. Like you're trying to fill that gap somewhere that your training's not providing you. Okay, so there's lots. So that's another. So a potential solution to that is don't have those. Now, don't restrict yourself and say you can't have those things, because what will happen is you'll just rebel, and you'll splurge, and you'll binge, and it'll go to crap, it'll go to shit. All right. The best solution I've had with this with clients in the past is the things that are your guilty pleasures or your coping mechanisms, don't keep them in the house. Fine to have them, but if you want them, you've got to go out and like walk to the local shop or and don't buy them in your big shop either. Don't buy them in your big shop because then they're already in the store. If you want them, you have to separately go out and get them, whether that's chocolate or wine or for example, your phone. Put your phone in a different room when you're spending time with your partner. Don't both of you sit there on your phones. Put both your phones in a different room, do something together, create that dopamine, create that dopamine somehow, some different way. All right. So that's a really good. So what that gives, that does two things. One, it's putting up barriers to the habits that you don't want, and you're trying to break down barriers to things you do want to do. So you want to create connection, you want to be eating good foods, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that you never have to have wine or chocolate ever again in your life, or alcohol, but the putting up the barriers to those bad behaviours is a good thing, right? And what that does, if you know you've got to walk to the corner shop to get a bar of chocolate and a bottle of wine, you might actually just go, you know what, I can't be bothered. If it's a long enough walk. Second part to that is you have the whole time. Now, don't jump in the car. You have the whole time to walk there, to walk to the shop and think, do I really want this? Is this serving me? Is this making me, is this helping me become my best self? And that's what you want. That seems to be a high priority for this person. I mean, whatever that means, that's kind of the self help stuff coming through. Um, you have that whole time, that walk to the shop to think about that. What are the repercussions for this making me a decision? And all the time your step count is going up and you're hitting your step goal. When you might actually get to the shop, I actually had this discussion with a client of mine last week where you might actually get to the shop and decide, you know what? I'm fine. I don't need it. The walk has cleared my head. The walk has allowed me to get a bit of perspective on things. All right. Um, and that's kind of that. All of this stuff is kind of wrapped up. Like all these, they're all part of the same thing. We're not trying to like routine, consistency, finding your why, um, uh, having a meaningful life. All these things, they all feed off each other. You can't have a meaningful life and just be a slave to dopamine all the time and constantly be wanting that dopamine hit all the time. Like these things feed each other. And what you'll find with consistency is the more that you can prove to yourself that you are the person who is consistent, the more consistent you will become. And then the last part is making sure that you're the limits that you put on your relationships with people, make sure it's not all take and it's not all give. All right. And that can be hard to do with kids because, well, like you brought them into the world. They didn't ask to be brought into the world. Like they don't owe you anything. Um, Perhaps you owe them something, but that's another philosophical debate that would like what's the dynamic between parents and children should definitely at a certain point the children should be it should be an equal a relationship of equals, and that's when you actually have a really good relationship. uh, and that's when you'll actually have a really good relationship with your children, is when you're in a relationship of equals. So don't try and please them all the time. Sometimes you have to say no to them for you to do something to yourself. Now, if that's all you ever say to them, that's maybe an issue. But there are times where you have to say, kids, I need some time to myself. This is dad's time. This is mum's time. Um, Maybe take them to the gym with you. If you've got a home gym, you're an example to them, getting them to work out. So yeah, the the ability for you to um, hold those boundaries in that relationship and a little bit of give and take. It can't be just a stone wall. It needs to be a give and take. But there's got to be a point where you say, right, kids, this is time for me to go to the gym, and you may have to make sacrifices to do that. For example, you may have to go to bed earlier so that you can get up earlier and uh, um, and get to the gym before they're maybe even like awake for school. So teaching the kids how to get themselves up, get them dressed, get their own breakfast, so that that actually gives you more time to yourself. Um, and then if they need to lift to school or whatever, or they need anything, then that's fine. Um, yeah, those are all possible solutions. I'm not entirely sure while if any of those will help. Hopefully, that's given you some food for thought. That was episode 2 of the Dad Fit project. I had some technical issues. My lapel mic died when I was halfway through answering the last question, so you can see my hands going, and but there's no sound. So um, what I'm going to do is record that just now, put that in, and then put this kind of outro at the end. Um, if you enjoyed watching that episode, is it a podcast? Yeah, I think it's a podcast, a video podcast. If you enjoyed that, which I hope you did, found it informative, um, maybe perhaps it better uh, allows you to better understand the kind of the theory behind strength training, and uh, perhaps it clarifies some of the thoughts that you had around your own training. Or if you're a client of mine and you're watching this, you can perhaps you can see the process that I'm trying to build into your training and your program with the stress recovery adaptation cycle. Yeah, so thanks for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, which you probably will be, please like video, that subscribe button. I'd love to be at the situation where we're starting to build followers, build subscribers, people were sharing it. If you found it useful, maybe one of your friends, your colleagues, or a family member might find it useful as well. Uh, Send it on to them, share it with them. All good for the algorithm, all that kind of stuff. But thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later.